Welcome. This is the Calaveras County Television Forum for candidates for Calaveras County Supervisor, District 1. I'm Dana Nichols, editor of the Calaveras Enterprise, and I'm your host tonight. And with us we have candidates Cliff Edson, Sharon Romano, and Gary Toffanelli. Thank you all for being here.
Welcome.
So we'll be taking turns answering questions, and we're going to start right off with a brief introduction from each of you. So I'd like you to go first, Cliff, and could you just tell me a little about your background and why you are running for a second term for supervisor?
Sure. Yes, I'm running for supervisor again because we have unfinished business in the county. I own a small business here in the county. My wife and I have been running it for 10 and a half years. It's a small restaurant. We understand the needs of small business and the challenges, and quite frankly, the challenges of finding good employees too. So the first time I ran for office, I made promises, and I've kept every single promise that I made, including education, economic development efforts. I also included some efforts around the environment and to make a more friendly government. And I've kept all those promises, and I'd like to continue on and continue my plans for the future to bring our county to where we need to go. And that's a more economically friendly county, a county that has young families working here instead of them leaving here. And along with the Butte Fire now, we have a recovery effort going on, and I'm certainly fully engaged in that too. So would appreciate your vote. Go to cliffedson.com. You can check out my website, and on that you'll be able to find out all the information about my accomplishments and where we're going to go in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Sharon, tell us a little about yourself, why you're running.
Thank you. I'm running for supervisor because I see a real need in this county. We've kind of stalled in a lot of areas, and I have the background to make things happen. I am a native Californian. I was born in Concord. I attended Diablo Valley College and San Francisco State University, where I majored in finance and accounting. I spent over 25 years working with Silicon Valley startups, not-for-profit organizations, and large global corporations. This gave me a lot of diverse experience. A lot of what I did was to manage budgets. Some of them were quite small, just a couple $100,000. At Hewlett-Packard, I was responsible for our department's budget, which was close to $8 million, and sometimes went even higher than that. I moved to Calaveras County in 2003 with my husband, and during that time, I've worked at First Five Calaveras. I've been involved with the community. I was on the board of directors for the Calaveras County Arts Council, the Commission on Aging, and some other organizations, including the Calaveras County Women's Network. I'm very proud of my involvement in the community. In 1999, I started a consulting firm, and I've worked with small and new businesses to help them grow, develop their business strategy plans, sales strategies. I built websites, developed marketing materials, and that type of thing. I've continued to do that as a volunteer with several organizations here in Calaveras County, the Volunteer Center, the Senior Center, Valley Springs Youth, Friends of Railroad Flat School. I believe in Calaveras County. It's a great place to live, and I know I can bring my skills and talent into this county, bring the people of Calaveras County together, and accomplish great things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Gary, please tell us a little about yourself and why you're running.
Well, Dana, I'm running because I see a lack of leadership in this county. I don't see a positive direction that it's going. I've been asked by many people to do so. I didn't intend to run when I earlier in the year when I was asked, but several things have developed since then. I just see no clear leadership here in the county. I've been here for 25 years. I grew up in Amador County. My grandchildren, I have my youngest son's grandchildren, born and raised here and graduated school from here. They work here locally. My youngest son works for me. I have 3 grandchildren born and raised in Hawaii. My oldest son. My wife and I have been married for 44 years. We've owned our own company for 25 years, so I have a business education. I have a business background in successfully running a business. I've been involved for many years in the community itself through various organizations, various nonprofit organizations, and international organizations also with Rotary International. Currently, I'm the Assistant District Governor for District 5220. I'm also involved in the Jenny Lind Veterans Memorial District. I am president of that district and proud to say that we are moving forward with constructing the new community hall down there in Valley Springs. The construction is due to start, is already started, and we're moving forward and should be constructed complete by September 1st of this year. You can go to my website and you can check it out for all the information about me and other issues that I have discussed on it, and that's GaryToffanelli.org or .com, either one you want to go to. So, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. So moving on to our questions, I'm going to ask Sharon to answer this one first. Should Calaveras County have an economic development staff or department, and why or why not?
I think it would be extremely helpful if the county did have an economic development department. It would be a focal place where businesses could go, people who are wanting to come into the county and start a business, or those who live here who are entrepreneurs and want to start a business. It would be, again, as I said, a focal point. It's very important. We have so many different organizations and groups that are trying to do the same thing, and we need to bring them all together, and so that we're not duplicating efforts time and time again. So this would help, because wanting to grow businesses in this county, bringing more income into this county, job opportunities for our residents is vital.
Thank you, Sharon. Gary, what's your take on this? Should we have such a department?
I've been advocating this since when I left office before. I'm very much in favor of it. I think it's what's needed in this county. It's done throughout California in all counties and cities and throughout the United States. I tend to go back on my business background, and I'm a contractor, and I'll tell you, I have estimators that their job is to go out and find work to bid on. That's what they do, and they bring it in and they bid on it, and we bring it into our company, and we have jobs and provide jobs. The same type of thing would be with this economic development department. Their job specifically would be to go out and recruit businesses to relocate, open up, or move here in this county. They would have at their fingertips all the information on what sites we have available, industrial, commercial, retail, and so forth, and be able to help what company they're enticing and we're putting in here to show them the best possible avenues of where they need to go. And then they would also be able to take these companies through each department to get the permits that they need and what they need to do to get open and running. This is something that's done throughout cities and counties and states to entice businesses to come to states. It's just, that's the way it's done. And it's basically good business sense to do that.
Thanks, Gary. Cliff, what's your take on this? Should we have such a department?
I'm more of a person for smaller government. So what I've done was helped rekindle the economic development company that we currently have in the county. It's a nonprofit. And they have done things like taking inventory of the business the current businesses. They've gone out and actually surveyed businesses. They've taken inventory of the properties that are available and what kind of properties they are by zoning, and and also the capabilities of each property for infrastructure, and what the cost could be on that. Beyond that, I've been working for about a year with the Calaveras County Chamber of Commerce on a project that I presented to them a year ago, and their leadership team took the project on, and they worked with the Central Sierra Economic Development Company, which we actually have a JPA with, and has been underutilized up until now. And so we were able to get a grant for it's in the process for $250,000. We needed a place to house, so I worked with the county to secure the old Hubbardie building, which is sitting empty right now, and we got them the board voted on a lease for them so that they can get started. It's a 2-year program. It comes with 2 years of an economic developer, which is exactly what we need for the county. And they will have all the resources needed to be able to work with the economic development company as well, and because they'll both be housed there. And we will we'll have what we need without creating more government.
Thank you, Cliff. Mm-hmm. Gary, I'm going to ask you to go first on this one. What industries do you believe have real potential to expand here in Calaveras County over the next decade, and why do you believe that?
Well, there's a variety of industries that could expand here. You look at the Toyon corridor over there, there's empty buildings right there. There used to be HVAC companies in there. I think that's very viable. I think that there's construction companies that can be put to work here and utilize the space. I think expanding companies looking to get out of the valley or even in the Bay Area, the high cost of working there, would have opportunities on our corridors, our Highway 12, 26 corridors, to be able to open up business and employ people, depending on which type of business that is looking to come here. It could be tech companies that could expand here. It could be construction companies, much like I run, a steel construction company, looking to move out of the valley and expanding and utilize our corridors of Highway 12. There's a wide variety of any types of businesses I think we can accommodate here in Calaveras County.
Thank you, Gary. Cliff, what kind of business industry do you think really has a potential to expand here in the next decade, and why do you think that?
Well, we have a real issue with infrastructure. Our internet connectivity is very challenged. Even our cell phones up here are very challenged. So about 3 years ago, I talked to a company that wanted to open up a data center here. And one of the issues there was the cost of power. We can't really help them with that, even though we have CPPA cut rate power that we get, through the government, since it's a private company. The other problem that they were having was the amount of process it would take to even get to the point where they can have a shovel-ready project. So it costs a lot of money to even be able to do that. So our general plan is really important to get finished to be able to do that. I think that our best possible choice right now is tourism, which we need to bolster as much as we can. The agriculture industry that's what we are, ag county really. The agriculture industry, if we can get water to these folks, reasonable water rates and water to these folks, then we can increase our ag capabilities. The other thing I've been working on for the past couple of years is a watershed management pilot program, which would allow us to be able to do some vegetation removal, measure the positive effects of that, and that would produce value. So it's a value-added product that should be producing like greater water yields or less wildfire danger. Those things are very important to us. They are a very real possibility now. as an industry, and it would put a lot of people to work. So I'm going to continue working on that one. We really need to be able to make sure that our environment is taken care of so they won't have to go through another Butte fire like we just did.
Thank you, Cliff. Sharon, what industries do you think really are viable to expand here in the next decade, and why do you think so?
Well, before we can even consider that, we have to have a legally defensible general plan. That will identify areas throughout the county where the growth is possible, where different kinds of industries could be put. And then we also have to have an educated workforce that can go to work with whatever industries, if it's tech, whatever, more ag. So it's vital. We've been working on the general plan for almost 10 years. I was part of a group that worked on just the San Andreas community plan that was going to be a part of that, and that was over 8 years ago. So we need to get the general plan done first and foremost. I said the education, and then developing the economic development department so that they then can reach out to companies to come into those areas that would fit the needs of their particular businesses. So, I don't see that we can really determine what kind of business is most viable here in Calaveras County until we do those things.
Thank you, Sharon. Cliff, I'm going to ask you to go first on this one, and I guess there's fortunate because you've been working on this issue. The question is, what is your approach to regulating the marijuana industry?
So it was released today. We have a urgency ordinance. We're a county that has pretty much bled out our enforcement group, which would be the sheriff's office, for many years because of lack of budget. And we haven't been able to do the things necessary to be able to control a lot of the issues that we're having. It makes us a target. It makes us an easy target. And plus, we have great water here. We have now we have 72,000 acres of manicured land because there's no more brush left. So it made us a real easy target. We have been working for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks on an urgency ordinance. We have the urgency ordinance on the agenda for Tuesday at 1:30, and that ordinance has been vetted by members of the public. It's been vetted by the sheriff's office, and it's also been vetted by our planning and county council. And also on that team is Debbie Ponte and myself. And so, the idea is to figure out a way that we can get to an original, a finished product, which would be an ordinance. On the ballot in November, there's probably going to be 2 ballot measures to control pot voted on by the people. At least it'll get us to then. That means we can have some safety, what's going on right now, and start warding off some of the issues that we're having around safety and people feeling like they're being taken over by it.
Thank you, Cliff. Mm-hmm. Sharon, what would your approach be to regulating the marijuana industry?
Well, if we don't do something pretty soon, we're going to be way behind the 8 ball, with also California having an initiative on the ballot in November to make recreational marijuana legal. So my first question is, why didn't we pass an emergency ordinance in February when we had the opportunity? I just downloaded the ordinance that's going to be considered on Tuesday, and I have a feeling this weekend that's my homework, is to study that. If we have good ordinances in place, we have set up that there are fees for growers. If we set up that there are restrictions, how far set back before you can have any plants, do they have to be indoors, outdoors, whatever? We have to get that in place now. February was almost too late. So let's get that done. Let's look then at what kind of revenue will be generated by having this emergency ordinance in place. Then with that extra money, One will have additional funds for law enforcement. And the law enforcement will have their laws and rules so they know who they can go after if somebody has an illegal grow. Hopefully, we'll also have enough funding to put drug prevention programs in our schools. Some additional money can go to mental health or rehab programs for those people who do have a problem. There's just so many opportunities for Calaveras County financially and in growing a business that is viable and is going to it's going to be here. It's going to be here to stay, so we better get on top of it. So I strongly believe in strict restrictions, and let's get a handle on this so Calaveras County is able to benefit from this industry.
Thank you, Sharon. Gary, what's your approach to regulating the marijuana industry?
Well, I think that it's out of control now, in my opinion. And it goes back to what I said in my opening statement about the lack of leadership. Back in February, something should have been done. It wasn't. We've gone 6 months. You talk about not having a sheriff's office and not having any control over anything. You don't have an ordinance in place for them to regulate it. You haven't had a sheriff for 6 months. You just appointed one. You had a chance for emergency ordinance a month ago, and instead of talking it out then and telling staff what you wanted then in it, you could have passed it then, reworded and brought it back and had it reworded. At least the sheriff's office would have had some way of regulating what the county wanted. And that's not been done. Now the growing season is here. We're in May. We're almost headed toward the middle of May. It's going. It's out of control. Trying to bring it back into control now, they're mostly planted. You're going to try and stop anything further from being planted in the ground when it's out of control now. You got people that don't want to live up there. You got people selling their land. They don't want to rebuild their houses. You got people that are living there that their houses weren't burned, but they don't want to live there. They're afraid to go outside. You got criminal imminent people probably up there growing pot now. So, what needs to be done is an ordinance needs to be put in place immediately and give the tools to the sheriff's offices to enforce it. And then a moratorium, at least until we know what's going to happen in this rapidly changing cannabis world, with what's happening in the ordinance, the initiative on the ballot in November. Plus, the federal government is thinking about changing their stance on it also. So we need to get at least to that point, and at least till January, and figure out what's going to happen, but not let it get out of control in the next growing season after that.
Thank you, Gary. Sharon, should Valley Springs have a community plan? Why or why not? And if you want a community plan, which one do you like?
I think community plans are extremely important as part of the whole general plan process. Each of our communities is unique. Valley Springs is very different than Arnold or Murphy's. And those communities want to keep their uniqueness. Valley Springs has had one community plan that was developed after input from a variety of meetings. One group had a grant that allowed them to bring in the community to voice their opinion and did come up with a very comprehensive, viable community plan. Another one was written and brought forward without the community input that is required for community plans. So I think the residents of Valley Springs need to be given the opportunity to look at the two plans and then once again decide what they as the community want as their community plan to be included in the general plan process.
Thank you, Sharon. Gary, tell us about your preferences on a community plan for Valley Springs.
Well, I'm going to address the issue on this that keeps coming up about the Toffanelli plan, as it's called. The board directed and gave me direction to do that. And you don't need to have any, and it was vetted, it was out in the public. There were public members involved in it, many members of the public. One group decided they did not want to be involved in it. And there's no law that states that anybody can come up with a plan and present it to the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors can decide what they want to do with that plan. There's no law that says you can't. Anybody can walk in and present it. And it happens all the time at the board where people walk in at public comment period and present the board with things. It's up to them what they want to do with it. And that board at that time accepted that plan and made it the preferred plan. Now, I'm all in favor and have been, and I've told many members of the community that I'm in favor of looking at melding both of them together and making it viable for everybody so everybody is involved in it. The final product for that plan. And the same thing goes with San Andreas Community Plan. I think both of them together in Valley Springs and San Andreas are viable, but they need to be vetted completely. And before it's adopted into the general plan.
Thank you, Gary. Cliff, what do you think needs to be done for a community plan for Valley Springs?
Well, there's those two distinct plans that Valley Springs has, plus they have the one that they're working on right now that is from the 70s. And I think that I don't have any issue with looking at both plans at all. I think it's up to the community. I think we need to do it in a public process that we have set up. The way it's going to that we plan on doing it is bringing it through the Planning Commission. And then each Planning Commission meeting is open to the public. Anybody can come in and comment on each subject if they like during those plans. And melting them together sounds like a really great idea. And I think that the public in Valley Springs should have an opportunity to do that. Nothing wrong with it. I think you got to be careful around community plans in general because you're dealing with private property and private property rights, so you have to watch out for that for sure. But I think that the public is aware enough of that, and the Planning Commission knows the rules and the laws to be able to vet those issues out and present to the board a very good community plan for Valley Springs. So yeah, I'm for a Valley Springs community plan. The San Andreas community plan is already included in the general plan. So we're good there. There were no issues or there wasn't any type of confrontation around that. I was actually a part of that one too. But it's pretty hotbed down in Valley Springs, has been for a long time. Within the next couple of months, we'll be running through the Planning Commission with them, and we'll put it to rest, and then we'll get our general plan on the way like we should be doing.
Great. Thank you very much. Nice segue, because I was going to ask Gary, describe your approach to updating the general plan.
Describe my approach to updating the general plan. Well, my approach is that we have going through the Planning Commission right now, and it has to go, after it's vetted through them, it comes to the Board of Supervisors. And it has several elements that still have to get through there. And I think it has to be vetted through the public. It will be done accordingly. As each element is passed through and detailed through the Planning Commission and before the Board of Supervisors. It needs to be done in an orderly fashion so everybody understands what is being done and what is being said as each element comes through. A lot of times when things are being done and things are being said, if they're done too quickly, then a lot of people don't understand what is happening and what's going on during the vetting process, and then later on they've come up against something that's happening to their property, if it has to do with new land uses, and they go to do something on their property, and they find that they can't do it. So I think during the land use issues that it really needs to be out there for people to understand exactly what their property is being zoned for.
Thank you, Gary. Cliff, describe your approach to updating the general plan.
Well, it was a priority when I got on the board. There's a few changes in the planning department, and once we got Peter Maurer now as our planning director. He's a very good planning director, and so we made, our board made a priority to the general plan to get completed. The process is that it goes through a public process. The public has had a chance to for input. I think there were around 1,100 pages of input that was submitted. Then it goes, each of those pages get vetted through the Planning Commission in an open and public process. From there, they go through each element carefully, including an ag element, which the Ag Commission had an opportunity actually to sit down with the Planning Commission that I set up, since I believe that we're hugely an ag county. It's our industry. And they had a chance to sit down with the planning director and get their input and get their ag element. Had a lot of good say so on that. So the once it gets through the planning process, which our process with the planning department should be completed right around mid-July, it will come to the board. The board can make a decision on it. And then it starts the EIR process. Now, the EIR process will take approximately a year. We could have her done. We've been doing this for 11 years. It's time to put it to rest. It's time to move forward with our general plan and get it done.
Thank you, Cliff. Sharon, what's your approach?
Well, first of all, we need to end up, whatever the process is, we need to end up with a legally defensible general plan. And by having the Planning Commission go through element by element, those meetings are during the day. A lot of our families work. They would like to be part of that process. They'd like to come to those meetings. So I think we've set up some barriers for that input. And public input is required. If we don't have the proper level of community input, our plan is not going to be legal. And again, I'm going to say that it is absolutely shameful that it has taken this long for this community. We have people who have been willing to work on the community plan, who have the background, who are land use attorneys, who are involved with the community, and they have offered to step forward and help make this plan legally defensible and what is required. So, we need to just continue to do that, and we need to get this done, and hopefully, we've got the one that we have now, it'll be done in 2017, and another EIR, the EIR will take another year. So, we're talking 12 years, and general plans are supposed to, by law, be updated every 10 years, and the housing element is supposed to be updated every 5 years. So we are way behind on getting this done. We need to move now.
Thank you, Sharon. Cliff, you voted that there was not a need to have a conditional use permit for the asphalt hot batch plant. Mm-hmm. Tell us why you voted that way, and I'm going to ask the others the same question, but why did you vote that way?
So the Planning Commission recommended that the Ford construction quarry already had the rights to be able to put a batch plant in there, according to the description in the regulations and the zoning that they found. Okay. And they vetted that all out. It was legal. We agreed to that. We knew that coming down the road, there was going to be an EIR process anyhow. The EIR process will begin with any type of air quality that when they get their authority to construct. And there's not much more to it than that. So the zoning, M2 zoning, is, you could almost build rocket ships there, So it is the highest manufactured areas that we have are the M2 zoning, M zones in particular, and so it's just what's legal and what's not legal, and that's the way it is. The EIR process has to go for air quality anyhow, because once they get the authority to construct anyhow. They're going to have to make sure that all of the impacts in the area are safe for the citizens.
Thank you, Cliff. Mm-hmm. Sharon, would you have voted to require a conditional use permit for the asphalt batch plant?
Absolutely. And I've watched the tapes of the Board of Supervisors meetings. I've read a lot of the materials, and it was never made clear that an EIR would eventually be done through through CEQA and the air quality. This is just another example of our leaders not listening to our citizens. There were hours and hours of testimony by the people who filed an appeal to not to require the EIR and a conditional use permit. And I felt sorry for those people. They were disrespected at those meetings. They were just cast aside like they didn't know what they were talking about. And then now all of a sudden we're going to get an EIR because it's required somewhere else. That is not right. We need to listen to what our citizens say. We need to listen to them respectfully, not make snide comments, not sit up behind that dais rolling eyes and almost acting like they've come into the meeting already having made up their minds without listening. There's something else that's happened with the whole appeal process that I'd like to bring up now. All of a sudden, the fees to file an appeal have gone from $100 to the $100 plus another $500. Those kinds of fees are supposed to be based on actual cost, and I'd like to see the study that showed that it costs $600 for somebody to file an appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Gary, would you have voted to allow that particular plant without a conditional use permit?
No, I wouldn't. I would have put a conditional use permit on it. And the rock plant itself has a conditional use permit on it. Their operation hours are only supposed to be from 7 a.m. until 7 at night. What's happened now as a permitted use, basically, and it is they can operate 24/7. A number of trucks can run in and out of there. Caltrans paves at night during the good hours. I mean, during the good season, the summer season. So those trucks will be going in and out of there at night. You'll be hearing beep, beep, beep as the loaders load that thing up. There's no control over it. The county lost all control over putting anything on it when they allowed and voted for it to be a permitted use. And I want to get back into Title 17. Title 17 under M2 does not say, it does not specifically list an asphalt plant as a permitted use. It's not there. It can be questionable whether it is or not, but that's at the discretion of the Board of Supervisors, whether it would be allowed, permitted or not, and they allowed it to be permitted. There is also the air quality. The only reason we're going through an AER now and going through partial CEQA, not a complete CEQA on it, and it's going through environmental health is because of the air quality issues that are required for it. And so they're looking to add on or find any mitigating issues that they can that can be mitigated away on a thing, but it still does not stop them from operating 24/7 and not even having a chance to limit any of the number of the trucks running up and down that road at all hours of the day and night in a residential area.
Thank you, Gary. Sharon, what, if anything, should the county government do to address overgrown forests, fire hazard, dying trees, and related watershed issues?
We experienced a devastating fire in our county and our neighboring county of Amador, and all the extra brush and dead trees. Now we have the bark beetle. That needs to be tended. We have to have some kind of program that is going to eliminate that kind of brush, which will lower the fire hazard. We also need to make sure our residents have the required setbacks so that they have defensible space should there be a fire. We need to make sure there are exit routes so that our residents can get out if they need to, and fire equipment can get in if they need to. So it's just important that we, because of where we live, the kind of foliage, the trees, whatever, we just need to take some kind of action to get that taken care of. I've heard that, there was a CHIPS program, and I think that was one of the things that program was designed to do, is to help take that kind of brush out and dead trees. the materials would be used in a biomass plant to generate energy, and that has been stalled, and I'm hoping that that will move forward and we can get the CHIPS program going, because that also allowed and provided a lot of job opportunities for our residents.
Thank you, Sharon. Gary, what, if anything, should county government do to address forests, fire hazard, dead trees, that kind of thing?
Well, you know, Calaveras County is unique in the fact that about 3/4 of the forest here in Calaveras is privately owned by basically one company, SPI. There are state forests on it, state big trees, and there are federal lands on it also. It's very difficult for the county to be able to maintain any of those properties, especially private properties. Where the Butte Fire went through, a lot of that was private property. It wasn't Calaveras-owned property, county-owned property. There are programs out there that Sharon mentioned, CHIPS program, which is still viable and still running. I talked to Mr. Walensky, former Supervisor Walensky, not too long ago about his CHIPS program, and they are doing very, very well. That's a contract process, and he contracts a lot with state to clear forest areas and also private areas also. So that program, he told me, made $1.5 million on their own last year. It's a very growing business, and they are looking to put a biomass cogen plant up in District 2. They're looking to get that done sometime by the end of next year, and that will expand on that program, the CHIPS program. But again, you know, the county can look to contract like I did. Wasn't even a contract. It was done through when we were clearing Cross Cove Creek. We went through there and got the proper permits to keep that clear so the water can run through there and prevent flooding. That's not being done anymore. But those are the type of things you can look at that the county can do, and look at private properties that have that type of stuff on it and see if we can get some local programs to go through and clear it.
Thank you, Gary. Cliff, what, if anything, should the county government do to address the forests, the dead trees, fire hazard, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a really big problem that we have. A couple of years ago, I wrote a program. It's called Calaveras Watershed Management Pilot Program, like I mentioned earlier, and it has all of the elements in it to be able to manage the watershed in general. And that includes the forest, private lands, public lands, the basin, and everything that we need to be able to make it a viable program. The CHIPS program can be a part of that. There's no issue with that. Right now, the CHIPS program has been in existence about 9 years. They've taken about $17 million in tax money to keep it rolling. And I think that you know, they're having a tough time because they need the right formula. The right formula is collecting data that could show a value-added product like water yield, wildfire reduction, and that sort of thing as they're moving along. And also, if you make programs like that accountable, they should be following the same guidelines that are going to be put out in our general plan and be a part of that process. When you try to manage things from different areas and you're not connecting the dots, it becomes very inefficient. And so what we need to do is bring them together through what I propose is an RCD, a Resource Conservation District, which is going to be which I brought through LAFCO, and it'll be on the ballot in June, and that will be a great vehicle to be able to manage this out of, because that's your central point for the programs. That is able to do work on private land, public land. It can assist with the federal lands and state lands as well, because it is a resource conservation district through as a special district.
Thank you very much, Cliff. We're getting short on time, so if you can keep your questions short, we might get through another one before we do our wrap-up. Gary, what's your evaluation of how our sheriff's office is doing, and what, if anything, do you think you might be able to do to improve the situation and get more resources to them?
Well, they just got a new sheriff. It took 6 months to get that. So how they're doing right now, I don't know. I haven't talked to the new sheriff. I'm sure it's going to take adjustment time for him to get adjusted to that job. and the department itself and how it's run. Right now we have a big problem in the sheriff's department with even keeping people, retaining people as officers in it. It seems to be that we're nothing but a big training ground because they get their training. We pay for them to go through the academy and get hired here and are on for a short period of time. And they move on to a higher paying job. So I would like to see us increase at least the wages for the sheriff's office to keep retain officers here and not just be a training ground and man up. I think right now we're short, including the jail. The sheriff's offices, we're down 13 officers. And it could be more as they go because it's very difficult at this time to keep them from moving on to surrounding areas. That needs to be looked at. That needs to be done. And I will work closely with the new sheriff to find out what his needs are. I think we have some very outdated vehicles that need to be looked at. Miles are going up immensely on those. So those are things that need to have immediate attention on.
Thanks, Gary. Cliff, what's your evaluation of how the sheriff's office is doing, and what are you doing to help it get better?
You know, considering how underfunded they are, I think they do a fantastic job. Through the Butte Fire, I was extremely honored to work with them and very proud of the work they did. They saved many people's lives. These folks that are in our sheriff's office right now are dedicated to our county. We have had a problem keeping them here. You know, they come in, like Gary said, they come in as a training ground. They last about a year, maybe 2 years sometimes, and then and a lot of times they leave somewhere else because they get paid more. You know, we need to look at that, but we have to get our economy up before we can fund that. So one of the things that I was really after for the past couple of years was a school resource officer, which went away 4 or 5 years ago. And so I was able to get that, and I didn't want it budgeted through the sheriff's office. I wanted to budget it through the county because it's our responsibility to make sure that our kids get the best possible education that they can. And a school resource officer like Sheriff DiBasilio, he did a fantastic job. We got Sheriff DiBasilio in office right now. I think he's going to be an excellent sheriff. I met with him for the past 2 days, and as a matter of fact, he helped us a little bit on this the cannabis ordinance. And I'm telling you that I think he's going to be a very good sheriff.
Thank you, Cliff. So I'm going next to you, Cliff. Maybe this will be a fairly short one.
I didn't get.
I'm sorry, Sharon.
That's
forgive
okay.
me, please.
No, that's.
What's your assessment of the sheriff's office, and what would you do to address it?
Well, I think the Board of Supervisors made the right choice. Sheriff DiBasilio is a fantastic man. I have actually been meeting with him off and on over the last about 6 to 8 weeks. He has some great people who have some wonderful ideas of what the sheriff's office can do to retain people and to recruit people and make sure that they stay in Calaveras County and we don't have this constant turnover. So he and I have discussed a few of those options, and I think they're very viable. And I'm actually looking forward to working with Mr. Sheriff DiBasilio to get that stuff done. And like I said, the Board of Supervisors made the right choice.
Thank you, Sharon. Cliff, what is smart growth, and how do you feel about it? Do you support it?
Smart growth, in general terms, is to bring people out of the outlying areas and into a centralized area where infrastructure can be provided. You know, it's okay to do it, but you shouldn't force people to do it. And when you have your centralized areas, that's where your inexpensive infrastructure can be put in and operated. But if a person wants to live out on their property and they're able to afford to put in their own infrastructure, that is their right to do under their property rights, under our Constitution. And so, yeah, we need to be smart when we do anything. We need to be smart when we build anything. We should probably try to build energy efficient. We should probably have the newest technology when it comes to sewer and water technology, which is, by the way, I was able to get from Columbia College to bring in a water class in Calaveras County, which had 18 students this year for water treatment and wastewater treatment. So those are the smart things in my mind to do, so I'm okay with that. The smart growth I think that you're referring to is the Agenda 21 type smart growth. Really not in favor of forcing people into areas that they don't want to live. And I'm not into forcing people economically into areas that don't make sense for them. I think that we can be smart and do it in a very property rights friendly way.
Thanks, Cliff. Sharon, what's your understanding of smart growth, and do you favor it?
Smart growth in no way is implying that people cannot live on large parcels of land away from the central infrastructure. What it means, if you're planning a development, that's one of the considerations you take into account. Where is the existing infrastructure? Those people that wish to live out in more rural areas, yes, of course they have the right to do that. They do need to make sure that they have viable septic systems, that their access to services is available. But smart growth is not forcing people to only live in certain areas. Also, I studied UN Agenda 21 because this was a big topic several years ago. UN Agenda 21 basically gives guidelines for new and emerging nations to design infrastructure and that type of thing. It has nothing to do with forcing people to live in certain areas or whatever. We need to get smart about what we're doing and know what we're talking about.
Thanks, Sharon. Gary, what's your understanding of smart growth, and do you favor it?
Well, smart growth, I think, was the counter to urban sprawl over the last several years. You talked about urban sprawl, where everything was moving away, and people weren't living in concentrated areas within the cities, and moving, concentrating, and building up, and not building out, and keeping infrastructure close in to eliminate any pollutions or environmental discrepancies that might come up while you were moving out. But I think in the west end of the county where I live, that's kind of almost impossible to do now. It's been for many years allowed to develop the way it is. You have people that came up here and bought 40 acres or bought 5 acres, or in Rancho bought 2 acres or 1 acre or what have you for their retirement, and spent many years paying it off so they could retire and come up here and build their dream home. And to shut that down for them is just almost virtually impossible to do. For the right thing to do. I'm one of them that moved up here 25 years ago and live on 6 acres. And I have a septic, a viable septic, and I have my own well system to get out of the cities, to live in the wonderful, beautiful country that we call Calaveras County here. So I'm in favor of concentrating more infrastructure. I'm in favor of building infrastructure. I think it's very viable for our industry and our economic development here in Calaveras County. And by doing that, concentrating some growth in the city and expanding out is very viable. That will help us in the future.
Thank you, Gary. So we're just down to just the last few minutes here, and I wanted to wrap up, and so I'm going to sneak in one tiny little question and then ask you to make a brief closing statement. And the question is, were you evacuated during the Butte fire, or how did it impact you? And then after you say that, if you could just make whatever closing comments in a minute or so that you can, I'd be grateful. And it looks like Cliff got to go first last time. So, Sharon.
I was evacuated during the Butte fire. I it was kind of a scary situation. But it was obvious that we had some resources. There were fire departments from all over coming up. So I felt safe when we got back into our home. We still had power, and thank the Lord we kept our home. But it was amazing how all of our citizens pulled together. I have a family that lives outside the area, and they looked at my Facebook page and couldn't believe the kinds of things that neighbors were doing to help neighbors. And that's one of the reasons this is such a great place to live. I think tonight we've heard the differences of our views. So what I'm asking all of you to do is I have a website, SharonRomano.com. I also have a Facebook page, Sharon Romano for Supervisor. Go out there and look around. You will see that my philosophy of being a supervisor is listening respectfully to what all of the citizens say and then act responsibly. So I'm asking for your vote on June 7th. If you have any questions at all, my phone is almost always on, and the number is 209-559-2673, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, Gary, tell us briefly how the Butte fire impacted you, and whatever closing comments you'd like to
Yes,
make.
I was not evacuated in Butte Fire, but I was evacuated in 2006 when the fire came through where I live. How I was impacted was for 2 weeks, I was a volunteer. My time with the evacuations, people that came, evacuees that came down to Valley Springs area. I was a coalition between the county and the Red Cross. Those two weren't getting together too well, and so I was in between those. I was delivering beds, cots, pillows, blankets, personal use packets with toothpaste in it, and washing soap and all kinds of stuff. I transported people for showers out of those facilities to showers at the gym, set that up. I was between all three evacuation centers, the Good Sam Church, the Jenny Lind Veterans Memorial District Hall, and down at the Burson Gospel Church. Set all of those up, helped set all of those with collating with Dennis Wilson, who was in charge of the Red Cross, and Frank Garza, who was his helper, and spent 2 weeks, solid 2 weeks, setting things up and keeping it going and feeding those people, bringing things in and collating and opening up our hall for storage for Red Cross. So I was impacted in that way and doing community service as a private citizen during that time. And getting back to my closing comments is, I think you did see separation between all of us here and our views on things and how this county should go forward and the future of this county. If you would like to visit my website, like I said earlier, it's GaryToffanelli.com or .org, either one. And I do have a Facebook page, Gary Toffanelli for District 1 Supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Cliff, tell us how you were impacted and if you were evacuated, and also any closing comments you have.
Sure. I was impacted on the first day was on September 9th. I signed the state of emergency to the fire, and then attended the first MAC meeting at the sheriff's office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I noticed immediately that there was a breakdown in communication between the sheriff's office and CAL FIRE. As we were sending our folks, our sheriff's department, out to the fire to evacuate people, we didn't have up-to-date information. The fire was being managed over at Tuolumne County, or in Amador County at the fairgrounds, and it didn't seem right to me that we couldn't have a live video feed at least. So I pushed for them to move their operation over to our fairgrounds, and on Saturday, by Saturday morning, they were moving over to our fairgrounds, and that was a very special day for me, actually. We are very lucky that we didn't lose the town of San Andreas. They called for the evacuation order. I was standing there when that happened, and I made them make sure that it was the right call. They pulled the evacuation order 45 minutes later, thanks to Chief Young, our fire chief here in San Andreas. Did it impact me? Yes. I was I was not only working in that center, I had to evacuate my mom by phone because I couldn't go out and evacuate her. She lived up in the burn area. I got evacuated, and my wife got evacuated. We live here in San Andreas. Had to evacuate my own street. We also fed many people that were fleeing from the burn area in our restaurant. Much of it was for free because they came out with nothing. And so we had to respond. The community responded. I visited every evacuation site, and we are where we are right now, out of time.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Gary. This has been the District 1 Calaveras County Supervisor Candidates Forum. I'm Dana Nichols. Good night.